Um, in short, the United States has made it such an issue in the region that now even the state of Israel has made it very, very clear, and especially Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, that even though he's known Joe Biden for 40 years, and even though he wishes Israel and the United States could have a good relationship, it's not there with the pressure that the Biden administration and sadly many of the Democrats have put on the government of Israel, saying the government is fascist, it's apartheid, so and so. So it needs to be dismantled. And this has been the straightforward language of the Biden administration, sadly. I only mention that because, being that this is the language now the United States is using, listen to us, be a puppet government, or else, and again, these are my opinions, ladies and gentlemen. Because of this, it has led to the state of Israel not being able to trust the United States in the Horn and in the Red Sea area when it comes to security. We should be united to be working on terrorism, whether it's from the regime of Iran and their proxies, or other actors such as Al Shabaab, such as Daesh, whatever the organization is that needs to be defeated. The United States has gone in a direction to say, well, we actually have a problem with the state of Israel protecting its own region and being partners with people in the region, because the United States under Joe Biden has different incentives. And some of those incentives are, we need to keep the regime of Iran's Shia proxies in power, because if we don't, we can't buy refined oil from Venezuela that is being refined by the Iranian regime. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're at a terrible crossroads right now where Israel has essentially been, in my humble opinion, abandoned by many Western countries that say we will be there, but at the end of the day, they're not. And that's specifically the United States. The EU is also very terrible towards the state of Israel. So, Israel, in my humble opinion, is much better off, again, being closer to our neighbors in the Middle East, North Africa, and the Horn, rather than a EU or a United States that says, Israel needs to get rid of its government, or otherwise it's an apartheid country, either, or it's a racist country, whatever the case. It's very sad that so-called liberal democracies in the West will paint another democracy in Israel as some kind of terrible entity if it won't listen to the exact policy that the West wants to force on us. So those are my humble opinions, and I hope I addressed your question, AQ.
No, you did. Thank you for that, Benji. No, you're absolutely right.
I, I just want to add to that, and
Go
Abdulkader, if
ahead.
you don't mind, in terms of the Somaliland situation with the United States, Somaliland as a strategic, one of the most strategic located country in Africa, and more than any other country in Africa, the United States actually needs Somaliland more than Somaliland needs the United States, because Somaliland is the only country in the entire African continent that has no influence from China or from Russia or from political competitors with the United States or with the West. Somaliland is the only country that the Chinese have no influence at all. And so if the Somaliland go with the Chinese, the United States of America will be in trouble in terms of its security, in terms of its economic power, because it will be the China overtake of the entire African continent. And on the other hand, in Benjamin, Somaliland was the single democratic country in Africa. We had a successful elections for the past, let's say, 30 years. We were holding one man, one vote, a parliamentarian election. We were electing presidents after presidents. We create peace and stability, and from scratch we create a stable economy. We are the leading telecommunication and banking finance companies in the entire African continent. Our private sector is extremely booming. We have one of the best in private sector that you can find in anywhere in Africa. So actually we tick all the boxes. What America is doing, they actually turn their support from us, and they are supporting a state which has got the worst case in terms of stability, and which is called Somalia, where there is a chaos, where there is no functioning government. The government of Mogadishu, they cannot even control the capital. And America is spending billions of dollars supporting Somalia rather than supporting Somaliland. So I think America, especially President Biden administration, they seem to be have got an agenda where they simply want to create chaos in Africa rather than to support democracy, stability, opportunity, economy, things like that. So I think they are working on the other side of a spectrum. They're supposed to be supporting democracy and stability, but they are supporting a country which is not stable, which is not democratic. There was no single election in Somalia. Again, the United States government, especially Biden administration, they are spending billions and billions of dollars. So they are forcing us. They are forcing Somaliland to go with the Chinese or to go with the Russian, because at the end of the day, we need some sort of in alliance. We have to have alliance in a global stage, which we can have a security arrangement, and which could be a protector of and support of Somaliland. So President Biden, he actually appointed in a lot of his advisors people who have no interest of even American in political interest in the whole of Africa. The people who have got a mentality, a tribalistic mentality, especially he put in on the State Department people who have no interest at all of American and geopolitical interests of the whole of Africa. So I think, and I agree with you, Benjamin, and we are experiencing exactly the same way that the Israeli are experiencing from the United States. And I think Biden should have done better, and he can still do better. I am not an American citizen, and I cannot speak because on behalf of America people, but I would say currently America is not doing good in terms of geopolitical situation in the Horn of Africa. They are really doing terrible, and they are making huge mistakes, especially in the case of Somaliland. Rather, they are supporting chaos, insecurity, rather than they should have been supporting us, which we have ticked all the boxes which you need, whether it's a security arrangement, whether it's fighting against terrorism, whether it's spreading democracy, whatever America stand and value of Americans stand for, we are stand for. So that's what they are doing, and I think maybe one of the questions I ask myself, if Biden administration go and we have got Republican, will things change? I'm not sure actually. I'm not really sure. I'm really surprised about the way in which American politics currently work. So I would not say the Republicans will be better. I'm not in that position. Maybe you may have some idea, but let's see. Thank you, Abdul Qadir, again. Thank you, Benjamin.
Thank you, Dr. Said. Let me actually ask that question to Benji. With the elections looming in America 2024, you heard Saeed's sentiments there. Will a Republican government, potentially a Trump government, would that be different in terms of Israeli US and obviously Somaliland US relations as pertains to the region?
Well, of course, you're going to see my bias here as someone who has family from Cuba and Iran. I'm very mixed, as I like to say, ethnically. But, you know, my people in both of those countries very much love Donald Trump. But when it comes from an Abraham Accords angle, I would like to say yes, because of the fact that Donald Trump, of course, with Jared Kushner, were huge architects of the Abraham Accords and were able to get a lot of the things going in motion to set up what we see today in the current Abraham Accords formation. That being said, sadly, Joe Biden has been actually a hindrance to the Abraham Accords in many different ways. And if you get me talking about the hindrances of Joe Biden towards the Abraham Accords, you'll end up getting me on a monologue. So we'll bookmark that in case anyone wants to delve into that separately. But when it comes to Donald Trump, I think he would be a better partner to the region just because he wants to see successful business. He wants to see peace in the region. And he doesn't want to see endless wars, which, in my humble opinion, Joe Biden hasn't stopped the endless wars. It's kind of been the opposite with him. So I would really hope to see that when there would be a fruitful relationship between the United States and Israel, between the United States and Saudi Arabia, and also between other countries that we might not be thinking of. Sudan is in the Abraham Accords. Donald Trump could have a great relationship with Sudan. He could have a great relationship with Abiy Ahmed in Ethiopia. I don't know about Eritrea, but if the United States switches gears completely and can reestablish itself in a horn as an ally against what I'm going to call Chinese and the Sepah, the regime of Iran's occupation, which brings all the Shia terrorism. Again, this is not about calling out the religion for the Shia Muslims, but we're just talking about the Islamists here. This could really, really change things. So I really did like Donald Trump's foreign policy, and I'm just hoping, in my humble opinion, that it can actually change the region as a whole for the better. And also, there can be fruitful relationships with the countries that maybe used to be enemies with ours. If we see a fall to the regime of Iran, which is one of the main actors that works directly with China to try to cripple Africa, we. I'll end it here because I'll go on a monologue. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Donald Trump will do so much for the people in Iran. The people in Iran have been calling his name in the streets. If that regime falls, it changes the whole picture in Africa, in my opinion. A lot of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Benji. You mentioned Iran there and your eclectic background. I mean, one of the issues at the moment for both our countries is the Islamic Republic of Iran. And for example, the issue with terrorism sponsoring and financing, whether it is the Hezbollah, in Lebanon, or in our case, the Al Shabaab and ISIS. Obviously, you guys already know about the Hezbollah Iran connections. One of the connections that are least known about is the amount of weapons smuggling that comes through the Persian Gulf into through the Indian Ocean to Somalia, specifically the northern coastal town areas of Bosaso and Qara'ad in Puntland, where a lot of the weapons are getting smuggled through there. There has even been UN reports as well as US Treasury reports about the individuals and their clans that are responsible. There's about a dozen or so individuals that have been responsible for the weapons smuggling in Somalia, and that has been a huge problem for Somaliland, for Ethiopia, and according to the reports, it suggested that Bosaso port is the epicenter of illegal weapons smuggling into the Horn of Africa, and that's where the weapons end up in Eritrea. They ended up in Ethiopia. They're now at the moment in the hands of the OLA, the Oromia Liberation Group, who are fighting against the Amharas, right? And now they are ending up in the hands of thus are not terrorist organizations, Al Shabaab Somalia soldiers, through the eastern part of the country, the border we share with Somalia. So it's a big problem for us, and it's a problem that the US, at least the Biden administration policy with regards to double dipping, be it with Iran and Somalia in our cases, is a rather unfortunate situation that puts our security at risk. And so therefore, that's one of the reasons why Somaliland and the Israel relationship has to be brought forward. In fact, I don't think many people know that Somalia is a fascist country. A country that has committed a genocide, as I've already mentioned, the Isaq genocide, and they have not yet been taken to court. They have not gone through the genocide convention as stipulated by the United Nations, and they're also at the moment committing a genocide as we speak against other tribes within the Somali territory. Right, and this is a concern for us that a country like Somalia, who does not control beyond more than 4 square kilometers of Mogadishu, the town center, that billions of dollars of aid money from the US, the EU, and other partners are ending up unaccounted for. In fact, in the last audit of 2021, of the $2.1 billion that was given in aid to Somalia, only 200 million of that was accounted for and used for government infrastructure development. Basically, $1.9 billion just went missing into thin air. No one knows where that money went. And we believe that that money is being utilized to finance terrorism, weapon smuggling, counterfeit goods, and creating more anxieties in the region in terms of further instability. And it's a concern because now the federal government of Somalia has been on paper an entity since 2012 and yet still has not got control of security, even though they are making huge hedgeways and benefits against the battle of Al-Shabaab. So that's something that must be commended on, though, for sure. Saeed, there's a question that came in the chat, Dr. Owa. It's a very simple question, but it's a very important question nonetheless. Somaliland. Do Israelis know that Somaliland is very different from Somalia? I know there was a Somalia ambassador there as well at the place. Do they know the difference between Somaliland and Somalia? And Somaliland is not Somalia.
That's really good question. That's really good question. And I would say the people in government and people in the academia, universities, research organizations, business communities, investors, all of those I have seen in the conference, they know the differences between Somalia and Somaliland. I wouldn't say the ordinary Israeli people whether they know or not, because I have not had enough time to encounter a lot of ordinary people. But the people I have seen from the academia, from the government, from the research organizations, all those people, investors I have seen in the conference, and there was a lot of people, that you may not imagine. We had a full, conference, if you like. And so all of those people that I have met in different disciplines, different sectors of society that represented were actually, they were aware of the situation between Somaliland and Somalia, and how Somaliland is really and is different than Somalia, but it is to do with the global situation and the global how the international community at this minute running. Everything is politics, everything is actually to everyone want to see what's going to happen next, and that kind of feeling. But they really like Somaliland. Those I spoke, they love it. Somaliland discipline of system of government, and they love the democracy. They love our spirit as a people in Somaliland. How we are committed, and it created a country out of nothing. And our business entrepreneurs, our innovation, and they love it all, because I have met people from telecommunication, from technology, from agriculture, agri-tech. Those people I have met, they really know the differences between Somalia and Somalia. And I can tell you, anyone who is listening me right here, and everybody that I met want to have a conversation with me rather than talking to the Somali guy who was representing Somalia. And I really feel sorry for him, because everybody wants to talk about Somalia rather than talking to Somalia, talking about Somalia, because I'm really humble person. I don't want to overstate myself or my country, but I would really say, from my heart, the conversation was actually Somaliland side rather than Somali side. That's how I want to end that question.
I've no doubt that they wanted to talk to you, Saeed, as well, for two reasons. Not only because they were interested about Somaliland, but also because of your charm and wit. Saeed, in the question was, do they know that Somaliland is not part of Somalia, was the question. Not the fact that is Somaliland different from Somalia, but do they know that Somaliland is a separate entity, that it was a country in 1960 that got its independence from Britain, and Israel was the first country, or the second country, if I'm not mistaken, or the third to recognize Somaliland. Does the and then in 91 we reclaimed our sovereignty. Do the Israelis, some of the members from the Jerusalem Center and some of your other colleagues that took part in this conference, do they know that Somaliland is not part of Somalia, rather than being like Somaliland is a federal member state of Somalia, like Jubaland, like Galmudug, like Southwest State or whatever? Do they know that? Were they aware of the intricacies and the historical differences between the two entities? Briefly.
Yes, I would say Abdul Qadir. I would say in short, is some did, some didn't. Some of those who actually didn't knew that I explained, and it was actually the first time I spoke to the conference. I explained that, and there was some of the people who were participating in the conference that didn't knew, but the differences between and the situation on the ground, and they were not updated about it. So I actually update those who didn't knew about. They were very sophisticated people who actually knew everything on the ground and Somaliland history background. And there was a lot of people from government of Israel who were who were actually there before even Somaliland was created. Some of the most distinguished and Israeli government and retired generals were there. Who were there before even Israel created. There was a very distinguished, above 8 years old man who I actually meet at the conference, a retired ex-army general who were one of those people were participating in the conference, in especially the security aspect of the conference. So I had a quick chat with him, and he really he knew all, he knew everything, and I was amazed how much information he had, because he was there before even 1960. He used to live in Djibouti, and he was Jewish from the Yemen, and Yemeni Jewish, and then he became one of the elite military elites of Israeli army forces. So he knew everything. So, but there was those who didn't.
Thank you for that, Said. Before I give to Benji, I just want to read a comment out from one of the listeners, very timely comment. They said, and I quote, tell the audience that Israel raised the alarm about the Isaac genocide and practically caused the Americans to stop the funding. That's a very important point. America at the time of the late 80s or in the 80s, America was in a huge investment deal with the then Marxist socialist dictatorial regime of Siad Barre, and they were giving him money to the tune of, like, I think $400 million, primarily all through the loan of the Berbera airport, or the Berbera port. So the Berbera was loaned to the Americans by the old regime during the Somali Republic era, and a large percentage of that funds was used to buy weapons and secure weapons that were used against the Isaac clan during the genocide. And so the listener just mentioned that the Israelis were one of the people to raise the alarm, to stop the Americans funding this repressive regime that was committing the genocide, and also raised the issue, obviously, as I mentioned earlier on, at the UN Security Council in 1990 as well. So thank you for that reminder. Before I go to Benji for I have a question about this actually genocide. What Israel can learn, or sorry, what Somaliland can learn about Israel from the Genocide Convention, or especially the Nuremberg trials. What can Somaliland learn about Israel in terms of the Nuremberg trials, how the Holocaust perpetrators were brought to justice, how Germany was made to pay the reparations and go through a course of de-radicalization. But I know you also have a point to make as well. So if you can add that with your point, please, Benji, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. So, to go back just really quickly to the Israelis and what they know about Somaliland, I do agree with all of Dr. Saeed's comments, but I would say that other than the older generation that is, in their 60s plus, they probably don't know about Somaliland, even if, they were watching it on the news that Israel recognized Somaliland. It's mostly people that actually have a geopolitical lens that are really aware about the Horn of Africa. Most young Israelis, unless they're Beta Israel, which is Ethiopian Jewish, or they are African. They don't really know much about the Horn of Africa, and that's something that I think young Israelis should learn more about because South Tel Aviv has the highest concentration of Horn of African citizens and also migrants. And then there's also Beersheba, which is a mixed Bedouin and Jewish city, which has a huge African population as well. So I think that's one thing that could be stepped up a bit in the education system of Israel, that we learn about the Horn, because when we read the Torah or Torah, when we read this, we learn about Cush, we learn about the region of the Horn of Africa, but we don't really know the people who live there now, unless you happen to run into them inside of the country, whether you're in South Tel Aviv, Beersheba, or even Jerusalem. So that's one thing that should change. When it comes to the Nuremberg trials and the Holocaust and what we can learn from each other, my grandma, Frances Gelbart, is actually a Holocaust survivor, and I'll link her testimony with Steven Spielberg in the side chat. It's a great question that you just asked, AQ, because this is something that I've tried to apply with an organization I started called South Tel Aviv Healing Project, which I have in my bio. And I'm just going to explain a little bit about what that is. The problem that we face in Israel that I think actually does lead some people away from learning about people from the Horn of Africa is whether they turn on the TV or they're on social media or they're actually living in South Tel Aviv, there is a lot of violence between people from the Horn that otherwise don't like each other. And there's also a lot of gangs in South Tel Aviv as well that are extremely violent. So there are Israelis that get turned off from learning about certain people, or there are the situation where you have Israelis that are told, well, the people who are living here, such as, and I don't want to make ethnic examples, so I'm just going to say the person from this part of the Horn of Africa, they're the good people, but the people who are living in South Tel Aviv from that part of the Horn of Africa, they're the bad people. Don't talk to them. They're violent. They're backwards. And that does go on inside the country. So that needs to stop. And that's what South Tel Aviv Healing Project is about. And tying it back to the Nuremberg trials and just the Holocaust in general, my grandma, Frances Gelbart, who I'm going to link, and I talk about her in my Sharaka video, which I'm going to post as well, she literally thought that there's no way we could ever have any negotiations with Muslims or Arabs or any sort of peace unless they lived inside of Israel and pledged their allegiance to the state of Israel. And then the Abraham Accords happened, and that completely changed my grandma's mind, not only about Islam, but also about Arabs as well. And that's the turning point for her. And that needs to be the turning point also for, sadly, other countries, other peoples who have been taught that the Jewish people, that the Israeli people cannot understand them and that they're bad, or vice versa. Israel is not immune, sadly, from any sort of intolerance or sadly even racism. And this is what, the Abraham Accords is trying to actually fix. When we learn about each other, when we delve into each other's cultures, as I said, when we learn even about atrocities that have happened to one another, it helps me talk to you and it helps me understand not only what you've been through, but it helps us, for the sake of humanity, actually come together. If we're not listening to each other, if we're not really hearing what each other have gone through, I don't think that's any way to actually have a real peace. That would just be essentially talking to a wall if the other person's not going to listen. So I hope that answered your question, AQ. And if anybody has any more questions about the Holocaust, please feel free to talk to me. I'm always volunteering at the Grove Holocaust Museum in Los Angeles. So if you're in Los Angeles, if you'd like a tour, please feel free to let me know. And we also host guest exhibits about other genocides. So if we're going to bring up the Yitzhak genocide, it's something that we can talk about, bringing up to one of the Holocaust museums in Los Angeles or wherever there's a Holocaust museum near you. Feel free to get in touch with them if you're having a bit of trouble getting in touch with them. If you'd like to do an exhibit on another genocide, feel free to let me know and I can try to help out.
For sure. No worries. Thank you for that, Benji.
Sorry,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
There's Isaac. I think Isaac is in the room, and Isaac is Somalilander, and he do a lot of work in terms of archaeology and he had a findings which actually my interested to Benjamin. And so, if you can give the mic to Isaac, if he's still here, that would be great because he did an enormous amount of work in terms of archaeology and early Somaliland relations with Israel. And I think he wants to say, I have seen a message from someone message me to give him the mic. Can you see Isaac?
I cannot see him, but if he is here and he heard you, please, Isaac, come and collect the mic and say a few words about some of the archaeological finds relating Israel or Beni Israel, the children of Israel, and Somaliland from the times of antiquity. So please come up and say a few words. We will be closing shortly, though, in the next 5-10 minutes, Shahid, so we won't be taking up any more of your time. This space was really... Said, can you close your mic, please, if you can hear me? There's feedback. Yeah, this space was just mainly used as a kind of a introduction to get to know Saeed, his role, the event, and about what happened at this rather historic event that over 30 countries took part in. So that's what we really wanted to talk about. Unfortunately, we haven't got much time. We apologize for that. And we weren't planning to take many questions other than the questions that were sent in the DMs via or in the nest below. So we're going to be coming to a close. Before I come to Saeed for his closing remarks, I want to quickly ask Benji to say a few words about what does the Abraham Accord mean for in terms of Somaliland-Israel relationship? What have we seen so far from the relationship with UAE, Bahrain, Saudi, and what can that mean for Somaliland in terms of Africa, Middle East relations, Israel relations as part and parcel of the Abraham Accord? And does the Abraham Accord open the possibility for Israel re-recognizing Somaliland sovereignty, just like they did in 1960 as well?
Absolutely. Thank you for the questions. First of all, I mean, I think joining the Abraham Accords is something that could possibly lead to the re-recognition of territory. But at the end of the day, something that we talked about a bit before is the Abraham Accords aiming to actually create a sulha, actually a program and a process where parties can come together from all over the region, whatever their respective dispute is, and come together to actually bring healing. This is something that I hope the UAE would be willing to come across, whether it's with an Islamic delegation or something that's maybe still an Islamic delegation straight through the Abraham Accords, in order to bring respective parties together. Because the question often is, how can Israel negotiate with Somaliland, and then will this create problems for other countries that might not necessarily want to recognize Somaliland? The answer is, yeah, it could create problems for the state of Israel. They may lose relations or become enemies with other countries that don't want to recognize Somaliland. And that's why it's incumbent not only on the regional players in Somaliland and surrounding Somaliland to be able to come together by any means, so that when the Abraham Accords does come, when we're bringing investment, when we're bringing development, and when we have also strategic military alliances, which usually come after the Abraham Accords are signed, of course, to protect the Red Sea region, that we then make sure the players of this region who are here to be united against anything that would otherwise separate us and create problems in the region, that we're going to have the process to a reconciliation, to recognition, and also, of course, the people of Somaliland. They want sovereignty. They want to be treated as equals in the region and seen as equals. This is something that my hope is the Abraham Accords can bring. Otherwise, the other question I believe you asked me was, what can it bring in general? And those are the things that Dr. Saeed, that you spoke about as well. And I don't know if I want to just repeat you, Dr. Saeed, because you eloquently stated everything that needs to be said about what relations can be brought. I actually did link a thread from my previous space with AQ, which lists all the different sort of developmental things that the Abraham Accords can bring. And again, the Abraham Accords is not just about economic cooperation. It's not just about hopefully future military cooperation. It's about people really getting to know each other and be able to see each other as human beings who live on this earth together that can actually contribute to something positive on this earth together. Tunisia, we had Azerbaijan, we had even Indonesia coming to Jerusalem. This is about the world coming together.